So, Dress to Impress has just announced their newest body type, and to say that players are unimpressed would be an understatement. Did you see what I did there? The little play on words, and I'm just teasing. But regardless, today we're going to be looking into the new masc body type that Dress to Impress has released and the community feedback surrounding it. And if you guys don't know, I actually made a video about this topic a little bit ago that we're going to get into, where basically I just kind of talked about how a lot of players seem to be frustrated that certain features in the game seem to favoritize the feminine presenting bodies and kind of overlook the masc bodies, in the sense that there wasn't a ton of clothing that fits masc bodies. When there's advent calendars or like special events, the majority of the clothing was only suited for the femme bodies, so it created this weird imbalance where players couldn't accurately represent themselves in a game that's based around representing yourself. So with that in mind, we're going to get into this post and just what the community has been saying. Now, as you can probably tell, my voice is very raspy today. I got sick a lot last night. I don't know what I ate, but I got very sick. So I currently have a giant Gatorade beside me and my whole throat is burned to a crisp from what came back up, so my apologies, it hurts to talk, I am sorry. But with that in mind, basically yesterday, Dress to Impress put out this announcement that says, "You've got mail," which I love the play on words, it's so fun. And they said, "Reworked and better than ever, meet the new male model. Here's to more male toggles and items." And they show this picture of the male model. Now, I do want to clarify that I think the trailer they put out on this post was really, really well made. And I don't want to undermine the amount of effort that went in from the team to make this trailer, because it was a really cool way to show the new body type, and I think it was really creative. But regardless, there was a comparison posted by the Dress to Impress news account that reads, "A side-by-side comparison showcasing the older and updated male model." So if we look at the old model here, you can see that it is much, wider. The muscles are much less defined, and the new model has much skinnier legs, a skinnier waist, way more muscle, stuff like that, right? So you can see there's quite a difference here. Now, something I do want to clarify is at the time that we received information about like potential reworks for different body types, more specifically a masc body rework, as well as a plus size body kind of update, there was some talk that I guess the old body type was asymmetrical, which just means that both sides don't look the exact same. So obviously modeling clothing for that would be very difficult, because then each side of the clothing has to be different. You can't just copy and paste the two sides. So I can understand why they need to rework the model. However, what I do kind of not understand is why the model has to be so skinny. And we're going to get into that in a second here, because personally, I feel like this just kind of sets really unrealistic body expectations. Not to say the first one was super inclusive either, because it's not. And at the end of the day, a lot of people use the excuse, "Oh, well, they're going to make, plus size bodies in the future. Like, it's fine, just wait." But at the same time, that was a feature that was hinted to more than a year ago, and nothing has come of that so far. So to tell players to just continue to wait while they progressively make avatars more and more skinny, thus perpetuating, just unhealthy body expectations for young children, I don't think is the best thing to do. Obviously, there is going to be some people that naturally have this physique. No, you know what? I don't think anybody naturally has a giant six-pack like that. Maybe you do, let me know down below. But I feel like this is a physique that is really unattainable for the majority of players. So with that in mind, it obviously does kind of set unrealistic expectations for how masc presenting people should look, and if you don't look that way, then it's kind of like you're the other. So I do understand how that could be harmful, and I try to be understanding to the fact that they obviously need to try and accommodate for stuff that's already in the game, but I feel like making the model so much skinnier, I don't know, I just don't feel like that was the best move. Now, Dress to Impress News did also post this tweet that says, "Studio Zach shares a message explaining why the male model appears to be quote-unquote skinnier." And Studio Zach rates, which is the developer for the game, to fit the femme clothes more easily and help us speed up the process so we can finally get all the clothes working for masc rigs and then move on to the plus size bodies in the future. This is where I get a little bit iffy, and this is not an attack towards this developer, obviously. They're just the messenger. I'm not, obviously saying that this person is the reason this is happening. However, I feel like it's kind of a backhanded thing to say when you say, "Oh, well, we just want it to be easier to make all the clothing accessible." I can understand you want to streamline things and make things as effective and as efficient as possible. I can understand that. And so that's why you make the body symmetrical. But what I don't understand is purposefully making a body significantly skinnier and creating a very unhealthy perception of what, the average body should look like, just to make it easier for the devs to make clothing compatible that, in my opinion, should have been compatible from the first place, right? It just seems kind of like a corner is being cut here. Do you care more about representation and making people feel, represented within your game, or do you care more about getting stuff out as quickly as possible so you can continue to sell more product? You know what I mean? And I'm not trying to accuse them of being like super capitalistic, but this is just the way that I see it. It's like, "Oh, well, it'd just be easier if we could just make the body skinnier." Well, there's no community feedback received from that. And also, all the bodies at this point now in Dress to Impress are very skinny. So what does that tell to the larger player base who plays this game? That they're not, they can't be models, that they're not beautiful because they aren't skinny. And I'm not trying to get too woke here, but I just feel like it's a pretty generic thing to want to have accurate representation of, body types within a game, especially a game that's all about representation. And so to almost like cut a corner and be like, oh, it would just be easier if we could just make the body skinnier, and making the body absurdly skinny and fit, which is just not realistic for a lot of people. I think that's cutting a corner. I think it's a little bit lazy, which I'm not trying to call the devs lazy, but I feel like that move is just not, it's not showing the community that you genuinely care about different body types. It's just saying, how's the fastest way that we can get this stuff working so people stop talking about it, and then we can move on to the next thing, which I personally, just in my opinion, I don't agree with that. I don't think it's very fair. Now, there are comments underneath this post, which I do have to clarify, I guess. I only blur usernames from people who left comments that I think may be interpreted in a negative way, or maybe I disagree with the comment, just because I don't want people getting harassed, okay? That's why I blur usernames, so people don't get harassed. So just to clarify that, because I feel like I have to clarify that every single video. But this person writes, I'm so confused what happened to the plus size models. And Dress to Impress responds, hi, we prioritized working on the male body rework because it was very difficult to adjust items for the previous body. We think it was important to ensure the bodies we have right now are working properly before adding other ones, which I can agree, but then don't promise something and don't tease something because you're getting backlash for being, allegedly, like people are accusing them of being fat phobic. I'm not going to confirm or deny that, but that's what people were saying. They were alluding to that Dressed to Impress didn't want to make plus size bodies, and then amidst that backlash, they kind of like, I would say like rushingly released 2 sneak peeks of 2 plus size bodies and got community feedback, and there's all this momentum behind the plus size bodies, and then once people stop talking about it, radio silence, which I don't like. I take issue with that. Now they go on to say, however, we know that we shared an early model of the plus size body a while ago and have had its release delayed. Going forward, we want to make sure any dates we share are finalized, which is why we will only share updates on the project when we have made considerable progress. Apologies about the previous communication for the plus size body. So I can appreciate and obviously respect their apologizing. I think that's what's really good, because a lot of games on Roblox that I talk about in my videos don't apologize for anything. They oftentimes act like they can do no wrong, and that any miscommunication is because you're stupid and you don't understand it, which I really dislike that. I dislike that mentality. I dislike that way of managing social media, and I don't agree with it. Now, when it comes to this, I do definitely think that the plus size bodies could have been completed by now if there wasn't so much, what I would interpret as prioritization of toys, of other updates, of the calendar advent stuff, of like collaborations, which obviously they have to do to keep the game's momentum going. But at the same time, it is unfortunate that something that I think is really crucial to the game has been kind of put on the back burner in favoritism of stuff that makes the game more money. Because at the end of the day, to be fair, I don't think plus size bodies would inherently make Dress to Impress more money. It would give them more social credit in the sense that they're being more inclusive. It would make them seem like a more, I guess, brand-friendly game for games or different brands to want to collaborate with. But at the same time, it is a little bit disappointing to me because it just feels like a lot of games on Roblox, although I can understand why, only prioritize stuff that actually make them money and have the best return for the amount of time they put into it. But I really do feel like plus size bodies are worth it regardless of how much money they would generate for the game, just because it makes the players feel heard. And I really do think it's important to value your current player base before actively seeking out new players, right? Now, I did blur these people's usernames, so this person says, you guys did that so fast, didn't you? But why did you never get around to finalizing and releasing the plus size bodies? After this, we saw that you do have the ability to sculpt a body and make the items fit into it. Would you be fat phobic? I don't know. Which, I can understand where they're coming from the first part of this. I agree with the first part where they say like, you can come up with this male body rework, but then you can't do the plus size body. So I understand what they're saying there. However, what I do take issue with is people kind of creating these like false narratives and like allegations against people based on kind of like no information, you know what I mean? Like calling them fat phobic, that's a pretty big accusation being against a game. And I do know there's been like rumblings of people claiming that they're fat phobic because they don't make plus size bodies, but a game not necessarily doing an action that you want does not inherently mean that they believe that, you know, bigger people are less than or anything like that, right? And so I do think kind of like the jump to, oh my God, you must be fat phobic. It's a lot to jump to. I think it's a pretty big assumption to make based on the very limited information that you have. Is it frustrating that these bodies have taken so long? Absolutely. But I think, like, again, jumping to conclusions, I have people do that with my videos all the time, guys. Like, it's like, y'all, why are you making an argument, arguing with yourself about something I didn't even say? Like, are you okay? And then they expect me to respond to them. I'm like, babe, I'm not responding to you because you made something up. Like, what are you yapping about right now? But regardless, I can understand why there is frustration here, but calling people fat phobic and making allegations like that and saying like, oh, you must be fat phobic. Like, it's obviously a rhetorical question here. Would you be fat phobic? I just don't think that's needed. And I don't really see that as what is happening here. I just feel like it's more so they're prioritizing things that make them more money. You know, and it's a tricky situation because in the modeling industry in real life, there is already a ton of fat phobia when it comes to plus size models. So I can understand why this may be a more sensitive subject for many. But at the same time, I don't inherently think that Dress to Impress is fat phobic. Sure, there's been people maybe on the team allegedly who've made comments like that, but I don't think the game itself is inherently like that. So I did just want to clarify that. Now, this person writes, he promised us plus size models, and instead of working on that, you remake the male model to have more muscles and a tiny waist. Which this is also a very good point. If you look at the two bodies side by side, I was just kind of looking at them like, I don't know, it just looks very, very petite. And not to say that a mass presenting person wouldn't have that body type, because people come in all shapes and sizes, right? Like, that's a given. But at the same time, I do feel like when typically skinnier bodies are more favoritized by society, I do think it is a little bit of a harmful thing to only show skinny bodies in your game, because where's the representation for the fact that, a lot of the kids that play your game, or a lot of people, that play your game are kids, and they don't necessarily have a perception of what is considered healthy versus unhealthy, and it kind of skews their perception of body image and what they think they have to look like to be beautiful, which I do think can have undertones of being harmful, even if that isn't their intention. Now, this person writes, reworking the hunky male body to be skinnier instead of doing plus size models. Yeah, I saw that too. I agree with you, sis. And then this person says, if you have to reshape the body to fit the clothes, then one, don't do it. Two, get people that can make the clothes fit the body, like how it should be. Which again, I can understand that the body was asymmetrical, so it made it difficult, but the fact that it was difficult to make the clothing didn't mean that you had to then make the body significantly skinnier. You could have kept the body at kind of the same shape, but just made it symmetrical, right? However, they decided to, in my opinion, cut corners and just to make it the fastest way possible so people stop complaining about there not being enough stuff for the male body. We're just going to go ahead and make it really, really skinny. Which again, I just feel like it's kind of a lazy way to go about it. It doesn't really show the community that you value masc players or people who present in a masculine way. But of course, that's just my opinion. Now, this person says, we didn't ask for the twink body. Make it a little thicker for a better proportion, which... The reason I censored this person's username is because I feel like the word twink in this situation, although it isn't inherently a slur, it's being kind of used in a derogatory way to say the body is like negative looking. And obviously, I think that people are allowed to refer to bodies in the way that they would like. I think people just need to be mindful of how they're using words like this, because words like this, although not inherently a slur, when they're weaponized in a way to kind of shun something or make it seem like it's bad, it is harmful. So although I can understand the body is obviously significantly skinnier, I don't necessarily agree with calling it twinkish or anything like that. I don't know. And this person says, gave the male body an eating disorder too, I see. Which, side note, again, there's a lot of people calling it names like ED or saying the word twink or saying, oh my god, that's so gay, stuff like that, which I feel like is inherently harmful just because there are people at the end of the day, maybe biological men or people who present as masculine, whatever it may be, right, that have that body type. And I would say, I don't think it's necessarily inherently natural to have a six-pack. I think that's a pretty hard thing to achieve unless you're super, super lean, right? But at the end of the day, I do think it is a pretty unrealistic body expectation to have, but that doesn't mean that it's impossible or never seen. And so if somebody with that body type sees these kind of comments, it's really not nice, and it is really harmful to a wider player base. I understand obviously these people's intentions is to advocate for having larger plus size bodies in the game itself. However, you don't have to advocate for plus size bodies by bringing other body types down. I think maybe just like a corrective or just well-worded statement being like, hey, I see you're trying your best, but I do feel like this is really favoritizing skinnier body types. Is there a way to make this more neutral? Because at the end of the day, I don't think players should have the option between someone who is super, super skinny or someone who is like much bigger, if that's the right way to put it, right? There needs to be some sort of a middle ground where there is just kind of like you can't even use the word average because there really is no average, but just someone who is, I guess you could consider between the two sizes, right? So the players have a variety of body types they can choose from, and I understand it's a lot of work, but at the same time, this game is actively generating a ton of revenue. They have a toy line, they have an extensive developer, team behind them, and so I don't think that, oh, it's too much work, or oh, it's too hard, or oh, it's gonna take forever is an excuse to not implement these inclusive features. But regardless, that's just my thoughts on this. I'm obviously not trying to send like hate or be like super hateful with this video. I think there's a lot of effort put into this announcement. I really did like the trailer. I thought it was really cool, but at the same time, I think they could anticipate there would be backlash when they're making the male body type very, very skinny, and obviously, in my opinion, favoritizing skinnier body builds. But regardless, I'd like to know your guys' thoughts on this down below. What do you think would be a good middle ground between the two body types? When do you hope that the plus size bodies can be released? Because personally, I feel like they should have been released ages ago, but I understand good things come to those who wait. So I'm trying to wait and be patient, but let me know your thoughts down below, and I will see you guys next time. Bye-bye!